International Council Ielts test.
Audio Jungle.
You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played only once. The test is in 4 sections. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1. Section 1. You will hear a telephone conversation between a client who wants to rent short-term accommodation and a rental agent. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first. Good morning. Ace Accommodation. How can I help you?
Good morning. I'd like to organise some short stay accommodation on the Gold Coast, please.
Certainly. Who am I speaking to?
Miss McKinley. Sylvia McKinley.
Could you spell your family name for me, please?
It's MACKINLAY.
The client's family name is McKinley, so McKinley has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5. Good morning. Ace Accommodation. How can I help you?
Good morning. I'd like to organise some short stay accommodation on the Gold Coast, please.
Certainly. Who am I speaking to?
Miss McKinley. Sylvia McKinley.
Could you spell your family name for me, please?
It's MACKINLAY.
Thank you. And your first name is Sylvia?
Yes.
Is that with an I or a Y?
A Y, the old-fashioned way. That's SYLVIA.
Thank you, Miss McKinley. Now, just for our records, can you tell me what country you live in?
Of course. It's England, actually.
I thought so. Now, when are you coming?
Well, at the moment, we're planning on arriving on July the 26th.
Oh, the 25th. That's the last day of the public holiday, and it might be difficult to find something available on that date.
No, we're coming on the 26th of July.
Oh, well, that's fine then. We'll have lots of good places vacant by then, although you wouldn't be able to move in until late afternoon, because our cleaning crew will need time to get everything ready for you.
That suits us. Our flight won't get in until early evening anyway.
How many of you will there be?
Just my sister and myself.
And how long do you intend to stay for?
Oh, only a couple of weeks. We'd like to stay longer, but we'll have to get back to work.
So, you're not coming on business then?
No, it's just a holiday. Why, what difference does that make?
Oh, you'd be surprised. Business people have different needs. You know, wireless internet, even fax machines and photocopiers.
No, we won't need any of that stuff. We'll be coming to relax and get away from all that kind of thing.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10. Good. Now, what exactly are you looking for? A house, a duplex, or an apartment?
What's a duplex?
Oh, that's what you might call a townhouse or a unit. You know, 2 houses semi-detached on the same property.
Oh, I see. I think an apartment will suit us just fine.
And how many bedrooms? 2.
1 or 2, it depends on the size. My sister and I don't mind sharing if it's a decent-sized bedroom with 2 beds.
Well, that makes it easier. And car parking? Will you require a lock-up garage? They're a little harder to find with an apartment.
We'll have a hire car, and as far as I know, there are no regulations concerning car parking. I think as long as it's not parked on the street and it's secure, there shouldn't be any problems.
OK. Now, I'm assuming you want something by the beach.
Yes, that's the idea. We want to enjoy the surf, sand and sunshine.
OK, but before we settle on an area and discuss your price range, I'll need to know about other necessities.
What do you mean?
Well, for example, do you want to be close to a shopping mall or the casino or the fun parks? Or do you want to be in a complex with or near a swimming pool?
No, none of that really matters to us. But we'd like to have reasonable access to the motorway so that we can drive up to Brisbane to visit friends there.
Well, there are quite a few lovely small towns to choose from. There's Main Beach, which is north of Surfer's Paradise, or Mermaid Waters, which is a bit further south, or Palm Beach, which is quite a bit further south.
Mermaid Waters sounds delightful. Is it close to the motorway?
Well, not really. The M1 is actually closest to Palm Beach, and prices are likely to be more reasonable there too.
That's settled then. Palm Beach it is.
Now, if you'll just give me your email address, I can send you information about the town and lots of photos.
Well, my email is smac13@hotmail.com.
And one final thing. How much are you looking to spend per week on accommodation? Do you want something at the luxury end of the market? You know, newly redecorated, great views, all the mod cons?
Not necessarily. Could we get something clean, comfortable and reasonable for $1,200 a week?
Could you stretch that to $1,500 a week? I've got a property in mind that you'll absolutely love, but you'd have to go to $1,500. $1,200 wouldn't cover it.
All right then, but that's our top limit.
Good. I'll get on to this straight away, and there should be something in your inbox shortly. That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Section 2. You will hear a counsellor from Health Services talking about confidence and goal setting. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 16. Listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 16.
Hello, I'm Jo from Health Services, and I'm pleased to be here talking to you today. You've come here today to learn more about gaining confidence and setting goals. How many of you are truly positive thinkers? Positive thinking is the key to confidence. It doesn't matter whether you are playing a sports match, facing an interview, or preparing for an exam. If you apply positive thinking, you will gain confidence. This is the secret. Positive thought patterns. Positivity leads to confidence, which, in turn, will optimize your performance. What is the one simple mental strategy that all confident people have in common? They concentrate on success. But don't they ever fail? Don't they make mistakes? What happens when things go wrong? The crucial difference is that they don't dwell on failure. Everybody makes mistakes. How else do we learn? Rather than giving up or becoming depressed, the best strategy is to register the mistake, note what went wrong, and determine what would have been a better way to act or what could have been done differently in order to achieve a more successful outcome. Then move on. Yes, erase the negative emotions. Allow those memories of defeat, frustration, or dissatisfaction to fade and move forward. Negativity erodes confidence. You need to put aside your disappointments and focus on successful outcomes. Oh, it's not that easy, I can hear you saying. Well, no, it's not easy to forget failure, but no one ever fails completely, so congratulate yourself on the areas where you did do well. Mentally replay the best bits, even if they're only a small part. Now, there are 2 more things you need to do. Firstly, rehearsal. Yes, you heard me. Rehearsal. Surely only actors in a play need to rehearse their parts? No, the truth is, we all need to rehearse. This is a surefire way to build confidence. Before the match, presentation, the exam, or whatever, imagine yourself performing successfully in that particular situation. And here's the second tip. Look confident. That will always give you an extra physiological advantage. So you can see that mind and body work together on this. You have to think and act positively. Let's talk a bit more about how to look confident. If you have to overcome a challenge, get rid of that anxious expression and rigid posture, those downcast eyes and nervous gestures. Even if you don't feel very self-assured, you can still give the appearance of confidence. Stand tall, hold your head up, make full eye contact, and keep an open expression. Replace the frown with a smile if you can manage it. And those hunched shoulders? Relax those shoulder muscles. If you need to, take a deep breath and stretch to release pent-up anxiety and tension. What if you have to make a difficult phone call, for example? Nobody can actually see you, so does it matter what you look like? Yes, it does. Practicing positive body language will help you cross the threshold into a confident mood. Before we move on to talk about goal setting, it may surprise you to know that once you have set a goal in life, the brain responds with a burst of activity, which we experience as, that's right, happiness. And what happens when the goal is achieved? Yes, there is another burst of activity and another feeling of happiness.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 17 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 17 to 20.
As you can see, the recipe for a happy life is to maintain a positive attitude and keep setting and achieving your goals. So, whatever your goal, whatever it is that you're aiming for, a new job, losing weight, giving up smoking, graduation, you need an appropriate, and by appropriate I mean achievable goal. That's the first step. The next thing to consider is motivation. How do you get going? Well, it's more likely to motivate you if you think of the rewards of success rather than focus on failure or what you might lose. So, you need to establish your incentives. After that, you'll have to work out the various stages and phases that you'll need to go through along the way and prepare for each one of them. If you're not naturally motivated, keep the targets small and achievable. But it really is important to ensure you collect the resources to accomplish the various steps. If you have performed that particular task before, you may already have the resources, or at least know where to get them from. If not, ask someone who has already succeeded. When you have got this far, the next stage is obvious. Yes, you have to take the first step. That's not quite all there is to it, though. The final thing is to remember to keep track of what you've accomplished. In other words, be sure to maintain a progress log. That way you can look back at your previous small successes and watch your progress along the way to achieving your goal.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Section 3. You will hear a conversation between a lecturer and a psychology student asking for advice about research methods. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Good morning. Now, what is it you want to discuss today?
Good morning, Dr. Reed. This assignment you've given us is the first psychology experiment I've had to do, and I'm not sure where to begin or which steps to take.
Well, conducting your first psychology experiment can be quite a complicated and confusing process, but just remember that, like other sciences, psychology uses the scientific method and bases its conclusions upon empirical evidence.
What do you mean by empirical evidence?
Well, empirical evidence is established by observation rather than theory.
And the scientific method?
Oh, yes. When conducting an experiment, you need to follow a few basic steps.
I know the first step is to come up with a research question or problem.
Yes, a question that can be tested.
How do I find an appropriate question?
I would suggest one of 3 methods. Firstly, you can investigate a commonly held belief, or what we call folk psychology.
I see. So I could examine the belief that staying up all night to study for an important exam can adversely affect test performance.
That's right. In that case, you would compare the scores of students who stayed up all night with those of students who got a good night's sleep.
I think I could do that.
Well, alternatively, you might want to consider reviewing the literature on psychology. You know, published studies can be a good source of unanswered research questions. I'm sure you've read papers where the authors note the need for further research.
So I would come up with some questions that remain unanswered.
Correct. But there is a third source of ideas. Just think about everyday problems and then consider how you could investigate potential solutions.
Okay. Perhaps I could study various memorization strategies to find out which are the most effective.
That's the idea. Next, you need to define the variables. You know, anything that might have an effect on the outcome of your research.
Yes, I remember we learnt about that last week.
Yes, that's right. Then you have to develop a testable hypothesis that predicts how the variables are related.
For example, students who are sleep-deprived will perform worse in an exam than students who are not sleep-deprived.
Exactly. Once you have developed a hypothesis, you must carry out background research.
I can use books, journals, online databases and websites.
Yes, all of those. I covered the reasons for background research in last Friday's lecture, didn't I? What you have to remember at this stage is to take careful notes and generate a bibliography of your sources.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30. OK, I've got that. Then I'm ready to develop an experimental design.
Well, again, you have a choice. There are 3 basic designs, and each has its own strengths and weaknesses. The pre-experimental design does not include a control group, so there is no comparison. What we call a quasi-experimental design does incorporate a control group, but there is no randomization, whereas a true experimental design has both control groups and random assignment to groups.
You've also told us about standardization of procedures. Is this where that comes in? Being sure to compare apples to apples?
Absolutely. Going back to your sleep deprivation example, the same exam would have to be given to each participant in the same way at the same time, etc.
Got it.
When selecting subjects, you need to consider different techniques. If you were to go through with your sleep deprivation experiment, you would need to ensure that your experimental and control groups were standardized. That is, all third-year accounting students, for instance. A simple random sample involves choosing a number of participants from a group of similar people. On the other hand, a different kind of study might involve a stratified random sample, where participants are randomly chosen from different subsets of the population.
You mean subsets with distinctive characteristics, like age, gender, race, socioeconomic status, and so on?
Precisely. Then the next step is to actually conduct the experiment and collect the data.
Then I have to analyze the data.
I'll be dealing with the statistical methods for analysing data in next week's lecture.
Oh, good. I guess all that's left then is to write up the data.
Yes, communicating your results is important, and in the next couple of lectures, I'll be covering the format and structure of a psychology paper and tips for writing each section.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. I feel much more confident in getting started now. Thank you for taking the time to see me. That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Turn to Section 4. Section 4. You will hear part of an Earth Sciences lecture. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 36. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 36.
Good morning and welcome to this Earth Sciences lecture. We've been looking recently at such phenomena as earthquakes, tsunami, volcanic eruptions and other natural occurrences. Today we're going to look at a lesser known feature of the Earth, which is known as the supervolcano. As the name implies, this is a volcano of a much larger size than what we normally imagine a volcano to be. The term supervolcano has no specifically defined scientific meaning. It is used to refer to volcanoes that have generated Earth's largest volcanic eruptions. As such, a supervolcano would be one that has produced an exceedingly large, catastrophic, explosive eruption and a giant caldera. A caldera being the gigantic crater that the eruption creates. Whereas normal volcano craters are measured in the hundreds of meters, a caldera can easily be as large as 40 or 50 miles wide. Around the world there are several volcanic areas that can be considered supervolcanoes, such as Long Valley in eastern California, Toba in Indonesia, and Lake Taupo in New Zealand. There are also other large calderas in Japan, Indonesia, Scotland and Alaska. Not all the calderas are active though. Normal volcanoes are formed by a column of magma rising from deep within the Earth, erupting on the surface and hardening in layers down the sides. This forms the familiar cone-shaped mountain we associate with volcanoes. Supervolcanoes, however, begin life when magma rises from the Earth's mantle to create a boiling reservoir in the Earth's crust. This chamber increases to an enormous size, building up colossal pressure until it finally erupts. An explosion like this could send ash, dust and sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere, reflecting the sun's rays and creating a cold wave lasting several years. Crops in many areas would fail, and many species of animals and plants, including humans, would face extinction. The most recent caldera-forming eruption in the US was about 650,000 years ago in the northeast United States. During that eruption, ground-hugging flows of hot volcanic ash, pumice and gases swept across an area of more than 3,000 square miles. The eruption also shot a column of volcanic ash and gases high into the Earth's stratosphere. This volcanic cloud circled the globe many times and affected the Earth's climate by reducing the intensity of solar radiation reaching the lower atmosphere and surface. Fine volcanic ash that fell downwind from the eruption site blanketed much of North America. This ash layer is still preserved in deposits as far away as Iowa, where it is a few inches thick, and the Gulf of Mexico, where it is recognizable in drill cores from the sea floor.
You now have some time to look at questions 37 to 40. Now listen to the rest of the lecture and answer questions 37 to 40.
It is little known that lying underneath one of the United States' largest and most picturesque national parks, Yellowstone Park, is one of the largest supervolcanoes in the world. Volcanic activity began in the Yellowstone National Park region about 2 million years ago. Magma rising from deep within the Earth has produced 3 cataclysmic eruptions, more powerful than any in the world's recorded history. The first caldera-forming eruption occurred about 2.1 million years ago. The eruptive blast removed so much magma from its subsurface storage reservoir that the ground above it collapsed into the magma chamber and left a caldera larger than the state of Rhode Island. The huge caldera measured as much as 50 miles long, 40 miles wide and hundreds of meters deep, extending from outside Yellowstone National Park into the central area of the park. Scientists have revealed that Yellowstone Park has been on a regular eruption cycle of 600,000 years. The last eruption was 640,000 years ago, so the next is overdue. The next eruption could be 2,500 times the size of the 1980 Mount St. Helens eruption. Volcanologists have been tracking the movement of magma under the park and have calculated that in parts of Yellowstone the ground has risen over 0.7 of a metre this century. This means the magma is rising. Geologists have called for a task force to be set up to consider emergency management in the event of a massive volcanic eruption or super-eruption. Experts say such an event would have a colossal impact on a global scale. The fallout from a super-eruption could cause a volcanic winter, devastating global agriculture and causing mass starvation. One past super-eruption struck at Toba in Sumatra 74,000 years ago and is thought by some to have driven the human race to the edge of extinction. Signs from DNA suggest human numbers could have dropped to about 10,000, probably as a result of the effects of climate change. The volcanic winter resulting from a super-eruption could last several years or decades, depending on the scale of an eruption, and according to recent computer models, could cause cooling on a global scale by 5 to 10 degrees Celsius.
That is the end of section 4. You will now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of listening test 10. In the Ielts test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the listening answer sheet.